thank you very much for joining me. My name's Dean. I'm Dean Kirwan. I'm based actually in Spain, in the beautiful Marbella. And today's webinar, we're talking about protecting and growing your wealth in Spain. Um, so what the goal is today is to give you some clear, actionable and practical guides to navigating your finances as an expat here in Spain. Those of you that have been here for a while, that have just newly moved here, it does come with nuances. There are some tricky bureaucratic and sort of problems to navigate. And I hope that this will sort of be informative, insightful, and allow you, at least you'll take something away from it that will prove useful. So a little bit about myself. Any dialect experts out there may have gleaned that I am from Ireland originally. I've actually been in Spain now for coming up to 11 years, which sounds absolutely crazy. And that in itself has come with a lot of experience of being an expat. I've worked in the sort of expat financial services industry out here since I moved, just like I say, up nearly 11 years ago. And I've been sort of advising clients in or around Europe for the last 6 years, with Spain sort of being the main destination that I focus on. In terms of my sort of speciality, here I am. Not a great picture. I'm sure you'll agree, much better in the flesh. But yeah, I mean, overall financial planning, retirement planning, any sort of investment and savings, and the big one which is tax and estate planning. Newly married as well in November. Still still going strong, thankfully, on that front. Um, for those of you that are new to sort of Holborn Assets are a British-owned family financial planning business, and pretty much now have grown to such a point where they've got 20,000 clients, over 450 personnel on the books, which are split between advisors, back office staff, and that's spread between 18 international offices across the world. So, I mean, a family-owned business, but a large one at that. So, Spain, why choose it? Now, this slide, you may think I work for the Spanish Tourism Board. I don't. This is merely, some of the reasons why yourselves and certainly myself opted to choose Spain. It's an absolutely gorgeous climate. You get 300 days of sunshine a year. I've recently taken up golf myself, albeit pretty useless at it. But just means, there's always sunshine to be enjoyed, beaches to visit, a great healthcare system, which I'm sure people have benefited from, beautiful scenery. And if you structure things in the right way, some favourable tax and residency options. Spain, is consistently one of the top destinations for expats to both visit and move to, and I'm sure that will continue to do so over the years. So, I mean, in terms of how you as an expat have arrived here, there's a varied amount of visas available for people that want to become Spanish residents. And I guess depending on your walk of life and where you sort of are in your life would determine what visa would be suitable if you're just about to move, or what visa you ultimately opted for when you did make the transition. Today we're going to kind of focus on two of the key visas, one being the non-lucrative visa, which is typically aimed at those people sort of later on in life. They've retired, they've got their pension income, potentially investment income, rental income, and basically everything that encompasses passive income. The other that we'll focus on, which is relatively new today as well, would be the digital nomad visa. This is for remote workers that would be employed by non-Spanish companies, but that can sort of opt to move to the country and sort of benefit from living in Spain. So the non-lucrative visa, for those of you that are on it, I'm sure you've been through the process already. It's pretty much for non-EU nationals and UK citizens post-Brexit, as I'm sure we've all sort of experienced some hiccups with that. And it's for those who want to live in Spain without carrying out any sort of professional activities or working at all. It's often retirees, as I mentioned, with passive income, and it's The way that it's structured is, there is a renewal timeline, which you can see here. It's granted initially for a year. It can then be renewed for a further 2 years, another 2 years, and after 5 years of continuous residency, you can apply for long-term residency here in Spain. In terms of, the financial requirements for that visa, you've got to prove that you've got sufficient income. This can vary dependent on regions, but typically it's about €2,400 a month, and every further dependent, an extra €600 a month. You need to have private health insurance, proof of residency in Spain, and a clean criminal record, which, as it mentions there, is not always requested, but sometimes you will be asked for that. And I guess in terms of how you can structure things to suit the NLV, there are a number of sort of options in terms of physical investment bonds that you can use, not necessarily to generate an income, although the option is there should you wish, but also just to demonstrate that you do have reasonable means to sort of, support your living in Spain. Effectively, the Spanish government are trying to get people over that and eventually at some point going to be some sort of burden on the system. And the digital nomad visa, like I say, relatively new, and something that is really kind of taking off, not only in Spain, but across Europe and across the world. For remote workers, it seems to be, remote working is very much here to stay, particularly post-COVID when people were working from home and sort of got more comfortable, I guess, being motivated, sitting on their own in their home office. And then it really suits, employees working remotely for foreign companies, freelancers with international clients, business owners who manage their companies remotely and can do and have more of an online presence. And to be honest, if you use the digital nomad visa to your advantage, you can really, really take really, really maximize advantages which you can benefit from that visa. So here you'll have a kind of list of the main eligibility criteria for that. As you can see, employment or client relationship. If you're employed, you must have worked for the company that you're employed by for at least 3 months and have a contract of at least 1 year. If you're self-employed, you have to prove that ongoing contracts with foreign clients and that no more than 20% of your income comes from Spanish sources. So that's really, really important that you don't go over that in terms of getting that renewed. Again, proof of income, you must earn at least 200% of the Spanish minimum wage. And typically speaking, that generally tends to work out right now at about €3,200. And that has to be, €2,700 and €32,400 per annum. Now, this is sort of one of the key benefits of going down the digital nomad route. You can actually apply for the Beckham's Law regime, famously named after good old David Beckham himself. And that effectively ensures that you're taxed as a non-resident for 6 years. You pay a flat tax of 24% on income up to 600,000 and no tax on your worldwide income. This would only be Spanish sourced income. So if you hold foreign investment assets, rental properties, dividends, paying sort of investment instruments, and any pensions held outside of Spain, you're not going to pay tax in Spain, and it won't sort of add to your progressive rates, which you can see there below. Spain's system, your progressive tax rates can range anywhere from 19% all the way up to 47%, including tax on worldwide income and foreign asset reporting through your Modelo 720. Of course, that tax on worldwide income and worldwide assets can also become prevalent depending on the autonomous region that you're actually living in within the Spanish region. So I'm sure, as all of you will know, those of you that maybe travel in and out of Spain potentially, Spain's tax year runs slightly different to, for instance, the UK's. It's literally on a calendar year basis from January 1st all the way up to December 31st, unlike the UK's, which is obviously April to April. If you're spending more than 183 days a year here, you will be deemed tax resident. Also important in terms of your worldwide taxation, because if you're becoming a resident in this sense, You will be expected to pay tax on your worldwide income, including UK pensions, rental income, investments, and that again can vary dependent on the region that you're actually based. And key considerations for those that are, considering the move more full time, and that's about how you structure any sale of UK assets, or even taking, for instance, for those that maybe are looking at an LLV, taking your 25% tax-free lump sum in the UK. There's no main residence exemption from capital gains here in Spain. If, hypothetically speaking, you were to sell your UK property, let's say in March of 2026, and then you opted to come and move to Spain in, say, May 2026, if you go over that 183 days, the Spanish Hacienda is going to deem that you owe them tax on that sale of that property. Albeit you can argue with the Hacienda till the cows come home. Those of you that have been here for a few years know you're probably not going to get much, or you're not probably not going to get anywhere, to be quite honest. They are amongst the most aggressive sort of, I guess, tax authorities nearly in the world. If they think that they owe you money, they will come after you. And it's really important to kind of get that structuring right, get that timing right, and ensure that, you're not going to fall afoul of them. So moving on to sort of investment and wealth management for UK expats in Spain. Today's webinar is particularly focused around UK expats. And there are some key differences in terms of how certain investment structures are viewed here in Spain, when in comparison with the UK. One of those in particular is the ISA and the premium bonds. ISAs will lose their tax-free status. Premium bonds will also. Effectively, any winnings or any gains made on either of those, the Spanish authorities will look to tax them. Now, for those people who maybe think, well, what if I don't report it? Not something that I'd advise. And, it is likely that you could get done retrospectively over the course of 5 years. I've personally seen it happen before, where, you're talking about massive tax fines. However, fear not, as there are, options available that can fit into the Spanish system quite seamlessly, that are effectively run as a kind of UK comparison. One of those being a Spanish compliant bond. A lot of people commonly refer to this as the Spanish ISA. Very, very similar in terms of structure. It's got tax deferral, which we'll run through in a moment. You can also look at sort of specific portfolio investments, and that would again be using some sort of bond or tax efficient structure to kind of protect that, if you will. And certain real estate investments can actually make a lot of sense. Again, that would be choosing a most tax favorable region in Spain, which of course adds to the sort of, I guess, the complications that you can encounter whilst becoming a sort of long-term resident here. So a Spanish compliant bond, what are they? How do they work? First and foremost, for any of you that's had an ISA before, if you can have a stock and share ISA, a cash ISA, and what will happen is they will be protected and be able to grow. So tax deferral, you only pay tax when withdrawing, allowing investments to grow. That's more commonly known as gross free roll-up. Lower tax on withdrawals, so you will be taxed more favorably when you're actually taking that money out. The fortunate thing is, and this is a key consideration as to whether you're intending to kind of remain in Spain or potentially you might move elsewhere, but you will have additional currency flexibility there. So, I'm a big believer in not trying to play too many games with currencies. I'm not a Forex trader. I wouldn't be trying to, guess what the markets are. You live in Euroland. My sort of advice would be you're better off to actually set up something that's based in euros. You know what spending power you're going to have. You know exactly what how that money is going to last you, and when you can kind of take it. You're not going to be waiting on any sort of currency game. And of course, these are Spanish tax authority approved, these bonds. They're very tax efficient in the sense as well that the sort of providers, etc., they will actually notify Hacienda of its existence. It sort of takes away any Modelo 720 reporting that you may have to do. And, as it says, why is this important? A lot of people potentially might be holding ISAs, etc., in the UK and unknowingly, creating what could potentially be an issue down the line. Just for everyone's information, the capital gains tax in Spain is actually known as personal income savings tax. The rates are there on the screen. Anything up to €6,000 is 19%, and it's a sort of progressive sliding scale there. There are no allowances such as what you get in the UK. Any sort of gain on capital, you will be taxed right from the first euro. Whereas, in the UK, you can benefit from some capital gains allowances. So this is just a little sort of table on the difference between having some sort of Spanish compliant wrapper versus an ISA. Tax deferral, of course, gross roll up, meaning that they can grow free of tax until accessed. Withdrawal flexibility, control over the tax timing, because you can choose when you actually take any withdrawals out. They are typically reported as a surrender value in terms of, you can minimize your wealth tax, depending again on your autonomous region. You get your 720 reporting if it's held within a Spanish compliant insurer. The capital gains rates, again, only on withdrawal, whereas those sort of rates which we looked at in the previous slide, they would actually be applicable on your ISA. If you've got 100,000 ISA and it grows to 106,000, you should technically be paying 19% on that at the end of the year. And again, for succession planning, and this really, I guess, comes in the sense of, are you here in Spain to retire? Are you here for the long term? Do you foresee the rest of your kind of life here? You can get some certain advantages for designated beneficiaries and tax advantages on sort of that succession planning and passing that on to any sort of children, family, whoever it may be. So this is just a minor study on the difference between holding a compliant structure versus holding a non-compliant structure, and what that effectively means to you. So John here has €150,000. He invests into two separate investments, one being a compliant policy and one being a non-compliant policy. Over 3 years, John's investment here, you can see in year one, it grows €10,000 in value. Because it's a non-compliant policy, you will actually be due tax on that. Whereas with a compliant policy, as you can see there, it's zero. And that sort of goes on and rolls up. Same here on the second slide. Again, investing into a non-compliant policy versus a compliant policy, when you're taking those withdrawals, you can see the taxable amount here from €10,000 in a non-compliant policy after €10,000 growth, in comparison to a taxable element of €625,000 for a compliant policy. Thus, eliminating 95% of that tax burden on that particular withdrawal. And from these examples, there are absolutely clear benefits of investing into a Spanish compliant policy. If John doesn't take any money from the investments, there's no personal income tax to pay on savings income. And if he does take out, there's a greatly reduced rate of tax, which I think I speak for everyone. The last place I want to be sending my money is to the taxman, and that's one thing for certain. So I mean that's sort of encompasses the Spanish compliant bonds. Again, I'm happy to have a kind of more in-depth conversation around these and how they would fit into your particular circumstances. These are not necessarily for everyone, although there is clear advantages if you're certainly going to be in Spain for 5 to 10 to 15 years. it's definitely worth considering. And these are typically structured as lump sum investments, meaning that they're not really structured as savings products per se, although there are some very good savings products out there in Spain, which again I'd be happy to have a conversation about, should you need. So in terms of sort of pension and retirement planning for UK expats, there's obviously a few things to consider. I'm sure everyone here will be aware of cure ups, SIPs, that sort of thing. And again, these are, I mean, if anyone's paid attention to any of the budgets, cure ups now not necessarily looking like the most attractive thing, but this really just lets you know how your UK pensions will be taxed within Spain. So your state pension is taxed again under Spain's general income tax rules. Workplace and private pensions are taxed as annuity income, and that's with progressive tax rates. Your NHS, your teacher, your police pensions and the like are only taxable in the UK, but still will count towards your total income for Spanish tax calculations, albeit because there's a double taxation agreement there, you won't be required to pay tax in both countries. So there's quite a few things that you can do in terms of drawing down a UK pension in Spain. So you can sort of set up certain regular withdrawals, which can be taxed at lower rates if they're structured in the right manner. Again, that would be on a case by case basis, and much would depend on where you're drawing and deriving the majority of your income from at that time. Your tax-free lump sum, as mentioned previously, not tax-free in Spain. If you're planning a move, please look into getting that done before, along with any potential sale of assets, houses, etc. And managing currency fluctuations. Again, a lot of people might get paid in pounds and like to be in control of that in terms of kind of sending it over to Spain. You might still have a UK bank account open, but certainly you can look to kind of structure that and time those effectively. And again, in terms of state pension implications, obviously, sort of similar things apply. Thankfully, they are inflation protected. So you know that it's going to rise as inflation rises over the years. But again, they are paid in pounds, and sort of managing that sort of sterling money that you have when you're spending in euros is key, and something that we can sort of provide assistance with. I mean, personally, for currency exchange, I'm big user of the online banks that are available now, particularly for sort of smaller transactions like Wise or Revolut. If you're looking at any larger transactions from sale of properties or tax-free lump sums, etc., I would recommend speaking to an actual currency expert. We have actually partnered with Smart Currencies, very, very good guys there, and I'll actually send out their details. You can make a free account on their website, and they've got a very, very good team who are always happy to sort of jump on and have a call and manage sort of any currency problems that you may be encountering. For instance, if you're looking at buying it in Spain, let's say, and you're selling in the UK, you can sort of set up something that's known as a forward contract, which basically means you agree upon an exchange rate now, bearing in mind that could work in your favor or work against you. But what it will do is cause a little bit of peace of mind that you know exactly what your buying power of that sterling sale is going to be when you come to Spain or when you're buying in Spain. How important is a financial advisor? Obviously, I'm a bit biased on that, and I'm going to say very important. But look, I mean, certainly from our perspective as a company, I enjoy kind of helping people. I enjoy kind of making sure that you can effectively have peace of mind, whether that's with your pensions, with your investments, managing any sort of future currency risk. And I'm always happy to have a sort of free, non-obligatory conversation just to assess whether or not I can add any value as a financial advisor. There's many cases where people have things set up right, and I can literally just say, as a second opinion, there's not really much that I could do here to improve how everything's set up. It looks like you've sort of ticked all of your boxes there. So, I mean, for those of you In Spain, for those of you considering moving to Spain, absolutely there are effective solutions to help you manage and maintain sort of tax efficient structures in the country that you're moving to. I'd always recommend if you haven't had a review of how everything's set up, or you're looking to move, to have that as early as possible. I think planning is key here, and it's never too late to sort of get the ball rolling on that. And we're certainly happy to support you in any journey of either relocating or whilst you're here in Spain, to basically assist and hopefully offer some peace of mind. Um, I myself am contactable on WhatsApp. My email is also there. I'll actually be sending out a follow-up email anyway following this presentation, with sort of a link to a diary if you so wish, along with some information on smart currency. And if there's any sort of questions, queries relating to specific tax or visa sort of questions, perhaps you have some uh, you know some issues that you're encountering on those fronts, feel free to get in touch. We, as a company, we work with a lot of very, very high quality partners in that space, and we'll be more than happy to give you a recommendation when it comes to that sort of thing. Um, that's the whole presentation actually done. Again, a lot of the information today quite generic, not exactly tailored to your individual circumstances. I do have some questions which were asked sort of ahead of the webinar, and I don't think there's been any questions asked thus far at the moment, which I'd like to think is because I've answered anything, but I would never be that bold. Um, so there's a few questions that sort of came through. This was sort of through registrations. Um, in terms of someone asked about currency conversions. Look, I'm going to send out an email if that's in relation to sort of property sales or any large assets. Like I say, I can give you a link. You can speak to Smart Currencies. They'll for sure be able to assist under no obligation. If it's for relating to sort of smaller ones, generally I would look at basically using Revolut or Wise. Don't rely on your high street banks. You will get robbed. Sorry to say it. In particular from the Spanish side, anyway, you certainly will. Um, in terms of some other questions, significant risks in investing in property in Spain. Admittedly, not a property expert by any stretch, although I have a good idea. But I think the biggest risks in relation to investing in property is really location, of course, and it depends on what you're actually investing into property for. Is that for capital appreciation? Then you need to be looking at your area, or is that for short-term rentals, long-term rentals? I think any of you that are in Spain for a while now will likely have seen that they are trying to clamp down in certain areas on short-term rentals. And it really just doing your market research in that area. Happy to put you in touch with someone that may be sort of better placed to answer that kind of question. Um, in terms of another question on the reporting obligations for assets under the wealth tax component of the Spain tax regime. Admittedly, and I think another one on mitigating wealth tax. Admittedly, I think you would be best placed to have a call. That really will depend first and foremost on where you are, how your assets are structured, and if we can look at maybe restructuring those in a certain way that's going to fall outside of your wealth tax obligations. There are sort of options that will allow you to do that. How to invest in the UK from Spain. In general, it depends on what you're looking to invest in. There are a number of sort of UK options that can be pretty attractive, but are you talking property? There are some sort of fixed income bonds and things like that that you could potentially look at in the UK. And again, I would be happy to have a conversation on that if you do so wish. Um, Guys, I think that's everything from me for today. As I mentioned, I will send over a follow-up email tomorrow. And as soon as the recording's out, I can send that to anyone that attended, anyone that didn't manage to attend. It doesn't look like there's any more questions for the moment. Of course, I would encourage anyone if you have any more specific questions, anything that wasn't answered, or you just like to get some tailored advice to your situation, see how we can help, please come back to my email and we can arrange a suitable time to speak. Absolutely no obligation from that. We can have a chat just to see if there's any areas that we can help or potentially add some value at the bare minimum. If any more specifics on anything else, please feel free to get in touch. You can contact me on WhatsApp, by email, and like I say, more than happy to have a conversation around anything to do with Spain, to see if we can help. If there's something that you ask that isn't within my scope, I can assure you that I'd be able to introduce you to the correct people to assist on that front. Um, Thank you very much, everyone, for your time this evening. It's been lovely hosting you. I hopefully I will get a chance to speak to you guys in the future. And yeah, I guess I can go and have my glass of sangria then, which I was putting off until I'd finished this webinar. But it's been a pleasure. Again, if any questions are unanswered, anything like that, please come back to my email and we can have a chat there. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great evening. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.